everybody. Welcome back to Five for Family. So glad that you're joining us again. So we are back with one of the most fantastic leaders we have in our church body. She leads our children's ministry. So Miss Pat, on to our story.
Good evening, family. I will be reading The Warrior Leader, Joshua and the Battle of Jericho, from Joshua 3 and 6. After Moses died, God gave his people a new leader. His name was Joshua, which means the Lord saves. Joshua was going to lead God's people into the special land God had promised to give them. By this time, God's people had been wandering around in that Bacon desert for 40 years. So you can imagine how sick they were of sand and anything yellow, and tents, and walking and being hot, and how happy they were to reach the edge of the desert and to see their beautiful new home. Right there in front of them, all cool and green and lovely, there was only one problem: Jericho. Jericho was a city, but it wasn't just any old city. It was a fortress. It stopped anyone from getting into the land. The people looked at Jericho, at the big, giant, scary walls all around it, at the tall, towering ramparts, at the heavy iron gates bolted shut, and at each other. What would they do? No one knew, but God knew, and God told Joshua what to do. But Joshua must have looked surprised, because it was a very odd battle plan indeed, as we'll soon find out. Then God made his people a promise: I will always be with you, and I will never ever leave you. If you do what I say, your lives in the new land will be happy and everything will go well. Joshua gathered his army together. They had their army together. They had their swords and their spears and shields. They were ready to fight. But the plan wasn't about fighting. It was about trusting and doing what God said. Joshua's army went marching around the city, day after day after day. They're too scared to fight, the people of Jericho said. But they were wrong. God's people weren't scared. They were waiting for God to tell them what to do next. The seventh day, God told his people to march around the city, not once, but 7 times. Then God told everyone to make as much noise as they could. Has anyone ever told you to make as much noise as you possibly can? Well, imagine that noise added by 39,999 other people making that noise too. And you get the idea: ear splitting. And as it turned out, stone splitting too, because the huge, strong walls of Jericho just crumbled to the ground as if they were made of sand. Jericho vanished in a great cloud of dust. So it was that God's people entered their new home, and they didn't have to fight to get in. They only had to walk. Joshua said, God has brought you safely here. Now will you do what he says? Everyone said, we promise. Only God can make your heart happy, Joshua said. So don't pray to pretend gods. No, they said. Never. I'm afraid they didn't keep their promise. They didn't do what God said, and many years later, just as God warned them, things would go badly for God's people. They would lose their home. Enemies would capture them and take them off as slaves. And God's people would scatter into many different lands. But God's plan was still working. One day, He would give His people another leader, another home. But this home, no one could ever take from them. Hope you enjoy. Good night.
Thank you so much, Miss Pat. So now we're going to move on to our question and answer. So your first question is, who is the new ruler of the Israelites? Press pause. What is the name of the city at the edge of the wilderness? Press pause. What did God tell Joshua to have the people do the 1st through 6th days? Press pause. What did God tell Joshua to have the people do on the 7th day? Press pause. What happens? Press pause. What does Joshua ask the people to do? Press pause. Do the people keep their promise to obey God? Press pause. Did God prove He could be trusted? Press pause. What's the consequence of them not obeying God? Press pause. Do you obey God? Press pause. What's the consequence if you don't obey God? Press pause. All right, now for the activity portion. So this week's activities, I think, are pretty fun. So your first one, like every other time, you can build it with Legos. This is a great one to make because you can build your own Jericho. And if you got the little people, you can have them march around. It's good stuff. You can also draw it or paint it, or even better, you can act it out. Now, if you're like me, you've got some Amazon boxes lying around. Maybe not enough to build up a fortified city, but still there's some in there. So you can use other items in your home, like a fort. Build it up with couch cushions or pillows, and build your own Jericho to retell the story. Another awesome activity that you can do, since there are 7 days in this story, every day of the week, your family can sit down and pray for something that's important to you. And on the 7th day, celebrate the fact that God is faithful to answer the prayers of His people. Even if what you're praying for isn't answered by that 7th day, we know, like we learned in this story, that God is faithful to His people. So for 7 days, you can pray for something as a family. And then on the 7th day, celebrate the fact that we know God is faithful. And with your celebration, do something fun. I mean, knock down some walls of Jericho. Pillow fight, snowball fight with socks. I mean, you know, the wilderness. Why not snow? I love you guys. I miss you guys. And I hope you have a great week. And enjoy Jericho. Bye.